In this episode of the Power of the Truth podcast, I interview Maike Mullenders, a yoga teacher and author who wrote about her traumatic childhood. Maike discusses growing up with a father who had undiagnosed mental health issues and ultimately took his own life when she was just 21. She talks about the impact of this trauma on her life and career, her journey to demystifying therapy and inspiring hope. So without further ado, let's get into it with Maike Mullenders. Okay, here we go. Welcome to the Power of the Truth podcast, Maike Mullenders. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me on.
No problem at all. So, for those of our listeners, obviously it's a new podcast, so new listeners, for those that haven't met you or heard of you yet, can you please explain a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your story, please?
So I am by profession a yoga teacher, but 3 years ago now, I wrote a book about my childhood growing up with a father with undiagnosed mental health issues who went on to take his own life when I was 21. He did try to take his own life throughout my childhood as well. And so the book was really about my journey. It was also about trying to demystify what therapy was like. And that there is, I guess I just wanted to inspire hope that there is a way to move forward when you've experienced real trauma. And along the way in the book, I describe some of the pitfalls that that I made along the way. But yeah, I just really wanted to inspire hope. Also, I'm a volunteer for Survivors of Bereavement by Suicide, and just to encourage people to seek help in whatever way help works for them. It's really different for all of us. I don't think it's prescriptive. So just to explore the possibilities. And I guess what complicated my journey then was that when my dad passed away, he left a confession to the police in which he said that he'd been inappropriate with me, which was something that I had no memory of. So, I mean, I guess you can imagine that I'm dealing with the fact my dad's taken his own life. At this point, I am his next of kin. So I have to identify the body, I have to liaise with the police, and then they show me this confession. So I'm really just thrown into a hole, I guess. And at this point, I'm in my summer holidays before I start my third year at drama college. So I've spent my whole life with this dream of dancing, of performing, and I'm about to go into this really important year. So my way of dealing with it was just to shut down on the grief and shut down on the anger and just plow on. But obviously it's really hard to perform when that is about showing your emotions. And actually I'd locked all my emotions down. I just, not consciously, but I'd frozen. So the book explores that as well. And yeah, I think that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, that kind of sums it up, doesn't it? And obviously, this podcast being about the truth, I mean, gosh, there's so many different facets within your story to explore in terms of the truth. I mean, you mentioned that your dad had tried to take his life throughout your childhood. I've obviously read your book, I've got it here.
Thank you.
And I think you'd learnt to switch off those emotions from being quite young, hadn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And to the point then that you don't know what the truth is anymore because you're adapting to the situation you're in as a way to survive, but you lose all sense of self and who you are. And then it took a long time to explore, well, who am I truly when I'm not trying to contort myself to support this very unwell man. And I
And
guess,
sorry,
yeah,
go on, carry on. Didn't mean
no,
to interrupt.
I guess in that respect as well, my mum didn't challenge him, so I had this role model who just did everything to placate him to make him feel okay as well as best we could.
Yeah. And there were other revelations, weren't there, where throughout that, from when you were 12, which he first tried to take his life,
Yeah.
which they announced to you, didn't they? They told you before.
Yes, so at that point they told me that I needed to say goodbye and that this was going to happen. And again, yes, that was the truth, but it's then questionable, is that really a truth that's appropriate to share with a child? And how do you expect that child to react? And I think when I look back at it now, this is obviously in retrospect, one is very wise, but when I look back at it now, I just think that my brain must have short circuited. I
Mm,
just don't think I was able to deal with that information, and I kind of disassociated really and withdrew from what was happening in front of me. So I sort of often describe it as sort of living behind frosted glass. So you're
mm.
kind of trying to protect yourself in a way.
Yeah. Well, and in that instance as well, that was the first instinct, was just to game face on, carry on. And without going into too much detail, because obviously we want people to read the book, but you went and did your ballet exam the next day, didn't you?
Yeah,
And
absolutely. And I think that, again, that was what I was modeled to do. So in a way, it became my normal. And I think that's probably one of the most damaging things about it is if something catastrophic happens and everybody says that's catastrophic, then you learn how to react to it appropriately. And I think because everything was just normalized, I stopped trusting my gut instinct.
right.
And I think that's really key is how, when you've stopped trusting your own gut instinct, then how do you keep yourself safe in the future?
Yeah.
Because,
Well, you ignore the signs, you ignore the physical signs and the mental red flags because you're busy going, it's okay, we're just going to keep going,
yeah.
aren't you? So in that
And I
moment,
think that was sort of the family mantra almost to keep going. And also, don't let anyone else know that this is going on. It's that thing of we're a very normal family.
and he was hiding other secrets as well, wasn't he? Because he was bisexual.
Yeah, he was. And again,
And
that was,
unfortunately for you, you kind of came across that by accident as well, didn't you?
yeah. So I came home one day and found him with someone. And I think what was particularly challenging about that was the point when my mum said, I want you to leave. But then that was also the point where he made another attempt on his own life, which I then felt hugely responsible for because if I hadn't come home, if I hadn't told my mum, I mean, obviously now as an adult, I can rationalize that it wasn't my fault, but as a child, that was huge. So I just carried so much shame and guilt that, yeah, I think it was very heavy. Funnily enough, I was talking to someone today and they were saying, what are your aspirations for the next year? And I just said, just to keep living in peace, because I think it physically took so much out of me that for me, just to be able to move peacefully, calmly through my life, and obviously teaching yoga, I've really created that for myself. But that isn't enough. I'm so grateful that I've managed to find that.
Because he
Um,
did it was quite dramatic in his execution, wasn't he? Writing letters to people and
yeah,
every time. And I know you talk about having to retrieve letters from a post box, one failed attempt and things like that. So there was this kind of element of drama around what he did.
Absolutely. And I think what is interesting then is that when life is so dramatic, that and you're sort of used to that and you're used to that adrenaline that comes with that, when life is then quite calm, which it did become, I was like, is this, I was bored for want of a better word, because I
Mm,
didn't feel, I was so used to hype and anxiety and stress that it almost didn't feel like living when life was really calm. So the sad part of that is that then I, for a period of my life, I started to create drama for myself through having unhealthy relationships, because that was, I was seeking what I knew.
it was learned behavior in that
Yeah,
respect.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have lived many lives, really, actress, counselor, yoga teacher, author, although they kind of, so when you look back, can you see a thread that kind of tied all that together? Do you think that actually those experiences as a child is the thread that runs through that whole experience for you?
I think I was really resistant to that idea for a long time, because I
Yeah.
was like, no, I want to be me who I was meant to be without all that shit, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
But actually, now I'm much more accepting of that. And I think, in a way, so when I trained as an actor, I did a lot of movement, musical sort of theatre. And so, in a way, to come back now to using my body as a yoga teacher is kind of a full circle.
Yeah.
When I worked as a counsellor, so I worked for Relate as a couple counsellor and a young people's counsellor, I realised that it was too much for me. So I would bring the work home, and I would, particularly when I was working with young people, I would worry about them. And young people can be quite up and down. So I would have, I'm giving an example, I'm not breaching confidentiality, but a student would come in and be like, oh, my relationship's ended. I'm absolutely devastated. This is all so sad. And I feel really desperate. And I would almost absorb all those emotions,
Yeah.
go home, really worry about this student, because for me, at the back of my mind, the fear is always, when someone's in a bad place, that they will take their own life. Because
Yeah.
again, that's been evidenced for me, that happens. And then the following week, the student would come in and go, oh, I'm really happy, everything's fine. And I would have just lost a week worrying and the stress. And I just, yeah, so it was really sad, but I had to make the choice, the healthy choice for myself, to step away from that.
Mm.
But having found Survivors of Bereavement by Suicide, I feel that I am able, in that context, as a group facilitator, to support people, which again uses the counselling skills. So I totally agree with you. I think it's all led to this place in a way. And that's wonderful. Even if you sort of go actor, counselor, yoga teacher, to me that journey now makes complete sense.
Yeah. And I mean, I actually agree. I've had many careers. It's a running joke in our family. I'm on career number 5 or whatever. But I do think, and certainly in terms of my spiritual journey, I do actually believe, even though it's hard, I think, especially when you've experienced deep trauma, to accept that everything happens for a reason, or that this was always your path, your destiny to help people in this way, or through yoga, or through, and like you said, it's taken you a long time to come to terms with that, hasn't it? And but what a wonderful thing that you now are able to do, to be able to support other people.
Yeah, I think I've made something of the situation that I was in. Sometimes a big mess, but I've created a life for myself that I feel I can be proud of. And that's not said easily. But I also think we live in a society where we're encouraged to do school, do university, do the career. I just think it's much more fluid than that. And I think there isn't only one way. There are lots of ways. I absolutely love the book, The Midnight Library.
All
I
right, I
don't
haven't
know
heard of
if
that.
you've, oh, my brain's gone. I'm trying to think who wrote it, but it's basically about how you can go on down so many paths with your life, and potentially your life turns on a decision. And I just think it's beautiful, and it sort of plays out all these different possibilities.
Yeah. I was actually talking to someone the other day who was talking to me about a bit of a sliding doors theory in terms of reincarnation and how our that what if our souls kind of every time we make a decision, we're living simultaneous lives and they split off and we take one
Yeah.
bit goes one way and one. I was like, wow, like, can you imagine if that's actually real?
Yeah. I mean, but that's where this book's going. But I think we are much more vast than we know. And I think that can be quite a frightening concept to think about. And I think I guess I used to try and control everything. That was part of my trauma response was if I could control my surroundings, if I could control what people thought of me, I got quite stuck in perfectionism then. But once I started to let go of that, which was really through my yoga teacher training, that I just became much more open and started seeing things. I mean, not always. I'm not sat here going, oh, yeah, I'm so zen. But that I started to see things as opportunities and learning that I think I'm much more resilient than I think I am. And yeah, and now I can sort of trust in that strength almost.
Yeah. Well, you've relearned to trust your instinct, which
Yes, yeah,
basically, which
absolutely.
yeah. So just to take you back then to when you were 21, and obviously I know you made a call to your dad, there was a police officer there, and you ended up going to the police station where you mentioned they showed you the note that
Yeah.
he'd left, the confession. Did you, in that moment, your gut instinct, did you believe, I mean, obviously, did you believe it or reject it? Or, I mean, how do you, in that moment, I mean, I'm sure you were probably quite numb, but how, in that first instance, because you're so young, I mean, 21, we think we're grown up, don't we? But
Yeah.
especially when we're still in education as well, you're not, are you? You're
No.
still so fresh and green, really, in terms of life. You know, how did you cope in that moment with that concept of truth? Because
I,
obviously you didn't know, did you, if it was you had no memory of that instance.
yeah, I mean, I think initially, like you say, I was just numb and I wasn't really there. And I very much felt like I was in a process of having to help the police to do what they needed to do to move on to the next step. So I was really just adapting to what was expected and needed from me. But certainly when I first saw it, I just said that's not true because I had no memory. Also, I guess they weren't particularly interested in that at that point because there wasn't anything that they could necessarily do with it. There there was a point later, I think maybe 4 or 5 weeks, when I did get a call from the police asking about that incident. They left a message on an answer phone, and I was living in my student house, and they also left a number. But I was so terrified that I remember taking down the number and trying to call the number from a phone box because I didn't want to call it from my home number. And then there was just an answer phone on the other side, so I just put the phone down. I mean, in many ways, I hope the system now would be different. If that
Yeah.
occurred, I hope there would be more support around that. I mean, we are talking 30 years ago. But
Still, you didn't get a lot of support, did you, in from any kind of social services or anything, considering the
no,
content?
no, nothing really. So I then just, I mean, I talked to my mum about it, and the two of us sort of came up with what now sounds like some ridiculous theory that he'd said that so that I would hate him, so that it would be easier for me to let go of him. I mean, it makes no sense really. But because I was then in my third year at university, you're doing back-to-back shows. That's what your third year is. So I was just concentrating on that. And it wasn't actually until I graduated that I had some time to think about all that. And I do remember just being huddled in the bathroom and just sort of my knees into my chest, just thinking, I'm on this line between sanity and insanity, and I don't know which way to go because I just wanted to let go. I was so tired and so confused and so lost. So I did then go in, I had some hypnotherapy at that point, hoping that something would come up, but it didn't really, other than I guess she did a thing with age. So she said, move your finger. She sort of regressed me and move your finger on the age where there were challenges. And I did actually move my finger at the age that he'd indicated, which was 7. But I guess life also went on. I just got married at that point. I was starting my career as an actor. There were bits of success. So I didn't want it to take over my life. I was so angry as well as, I was going to say grieving, but I don't really think I was grieving. I don't think I knew what that was. So I was just so determined that I wanted to live a good life, that I wanted to pursue this career that I'd really worked for from a very young age. And so I then left the therapy. I then had therapy at other times in my life again. And in one of those, particularly, I worked with someone who I really trusted for a long time. And I asked this therapist, I said, do you think it's possible that it happened? Because I just don't know. And he said, I think it's possible from the behavior that you've had in and out of relationships. I think it's possible also because your dad said it. Then, because I moved cities, it was just unfortunate. I then ended up working with a different therapist who said, I'm not sure it happened. So I was still very conflicted about it. And it wasn't actually until maybe 6, 7 years ago that because of training as a yoga teacher, I started meditating. And so I was sat really still, and I wasn't really thinking about anything in particular. I wasn't even really thinking about this. And then it just came to me that I would never know. Because even if some image or some feeling or whatever it was, even if it came back, how could I trust it? How could I really trust that I hadn't concocted this? When I sort of realized that, I cried. But I also sort of go, why the hell didn't I think of that 20 years before? Because it's so simple. It's so simple. But maybe Yeah, I guess I had to explore all those options. And at that point, that knowledge just really dropped into my body that
Yeah.
I would never know. And actually, since then, that has really been, there are still moments when a flicker of something, a thought or whatever, but generally, I feel really accepting of that. I won't ever know, and I can keep scrabbling around. And in fact, there are new therapies now since I've been in therapy. So EMDR, the rapid eye movement
Oh, yeah.
one, is a big one. And there was a point where I was going, oh, should I go and try that? And I just think, no, why would I do that to myself? I'm I feel at peace with where I am now, generally speaking. So why would I bring all that up again and start chasing that answer? And even if I did some miraculous new therapy and something came up, even then, could I trust it? And do I need to know? Is also the other question. It's not, I think it's not festering, it's not causing me pain in the way that it was at the beginning. So,
Yeah. Well, that quest for the truth, that basically that you went on from being 21 until just a few years ago, really, that was all again part of the whole journey, wasn't it? And actually, the
yeah,
realization and coming to terms with the fact that you're never going to know the truth is just, I mean, a victory really for you in the sense that you're probably not completely free, because like you said, there are always little moments or flickers or thoughts,
yeah,
but in the freedom is in the peace, like you said, like
yeah,
in the being able to live and go, it wouldn't serve me actually to know now because I've made peace with it.
yeah.
And I guess that's quite incredible just in itself, isn't it?
It certainly feels incredible to me that I mean, as I said, I sort of, I do when I look back at it now, I go, that's such a simple thing when you say it. I will never know and I don't need to know. And why did it take me so long to get there? But that's how long it took. And
But again, but I think that's where the grief part kicks in because you're grieving the relationship, just the loss, and it's how you process that relationship. I've had a loss myself this year, a significant one, and I think my relationship with that person at the end of their life wasn't as good as it had been previously. And there's a process, certainly there has been for me, of regret or wishing things had been different or wishing I'd done things differently. And in no way was that anywhere near the level of trauma or uh, experience that you went through. So I can't imagine having even just struggled with that very small thing as far as I'm concerned, really, in the grand scheme of things. I mean, that's magnified by 100 in comparison. So I'm not surprised it
yeah,
took so long. And although it seems like the simplest of outcomes, actually, there had to be the process
yes.
to
And
get
I
there.
almost had to explore every little dimension of it to be able to get to that point. And I think it's such an interesting thing with grief. I think I'm almost, I've grieved more in the last 3, 4 years than I ever did. I've sort of, because I've found peace with it, I've been able to look at the positive things about my dad. So he left such a complicated legacy that I was always at a distance from him. And now I can go, well, yes, you were massively complicated and it was really difficult, but there were also really properly wonderful things about him. One being that he would, every couple of years, he would take me to London and would get tickets for these shows. Like he took me to see cats and chess and all these wonderful things. Yeah, because that was my passion and he was supporting me in it. So those are really special memories, I guess.
Yeah. And I think it's really easy, isn't it, just to focus on the negatives in those times. And I'm so happy to hear for you that you're now able to retrospectively look back on the positives as well. And that I
Yeah.
think is probably a true sign that you are recovering,
Yeah.
really.
And I think it's for me, the freedom came when I allowed myself to feel everything. So to feel the complication, but also to feel the nice bits. And nothing is black and white. We're all complex, aren't we? We're so messy
Yeah.
as humans, but we don't really talk about that. And it's certainly not what social media encourages. It's also polished.
And actually, even less so, people talked about it 30 years ago. Everything was swept under the carpet, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because nobody wanted old Mrs. down the road talking about what you were doing. Because it was, especially living up north, and I know obviously a fellow northerner, everybody knows everybody's business. And it is, that can be a challenge, actually.
Well, and I think also because obviously we moved over from Holland when I was 4, so we were immigrants, and I think it's just how do you fit in? I mean, I have to
Mm.
say, I love the North. I love the North. If it wasn't so cold, I'd be back up there. But yeah, we were always made to feel incredibly welcome. So
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's wonderful. You would have been known as a comer in, though, wouldn't you? That's what where even my mum, who'd lived in the village that I grew up in for 40 years, because she was from Barnsley, there were old ladies in the village that still told her she was a comer in. She was like, I've been here 40 years.
oh,
But yeah. So just moving on then. So how do you think this journey that you've been on has affected your ability to trust others? Because I'm sure it it must have always been a challenge for you in that respect. Because again, we've talked about trusting yourself and trusting your gut instinct, which you've had to relearn. Did that affect your ability to trust other people and not assume that they were going to leave you, or was that an
yeah.
issue?
I mean, that's a really good question. I almost want to say you should ask my husband about
Oh,
that. But yeah, I definitely struggled with trust. And I certainly, in the early stages of having relationships, I would only give a very small part of myself and I would hold back to protect myself. Now I've been in a relationship for, gosh, 22 years. So I still know that I have those moments that I can very quickly put my wall down. Luckily, we talk about those things. But yeah, I think in some ways I'm that wounded animal that isn't gonna go, okay.
yeah,
Yeah, and I have to accept that about myself as well, I think, because much as I'd like to shed all that, it's that runs so deeply. But I guess I'm learning to, even in friendships, I'm learning that it's give and take and that I can start to trust. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge. It's interesting that obviously with my children, I don't have that. And there is just such a sense of warmth and connection.
yeah. That was my
Um,
next question, actually, in terms of being a mom and, how obviously your role models, as you've explained, were challenging in terms of bottling things up, certainly, but also in terms of just the loss and the drama that went along with your dad and that feeling of you were parenting him actually in quite a lot
yeah.
of instances. And so, in terms of then figuring out how to be a mum and what things you wanted your children to how you wanted them to experience childhood. How do you think that affected your ability to parent? And then obviously they've grown up, aren't they now? So
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah, tell me about that.
I think it shifted hugely. I think I became a different parent as I was parenting, and I think a lot of that was to do with the yoga and finding much more calm inside myself. I think when I first, so we had twins, which sort of immediately throws you in the deep end, and it just became about keeping them alive and just getting to the end of the day, everybody having been fed, nappies being clean, and then hopefully getting a little bit of sleep. It really was a bit of a
It's
rat
fight or
race.
flight, isn't it, in that moment?
Yeah, totally. And I guess what was positive, because I was used to adapting for other people, I was completely able to adapt to their needs. But obviously, going forward, that's not helpful. And I then had to really learn to create a life for myself because I found it quite easy to hide in being the carer, looking after them, having this role that I was very used to. So, but yeah, I mean, we have a very open relationship. We talk about everything to the point that they sometimes go, oh, for God's sake, mum, shush. It's too much. No, cut. But yeah, I mean, for me, that is of everything that I've achieved in my life, for everything I've done, that is above anything. I get so much joy from it and worry. But yeah, I think the other thing that's been challenging is that when you've had a very dysfunctional childhood yourself, and then your children are in quite what I would hope is a functional family, when they start to get disgruntled or complain, it's really hard because that inner child in me, she's still there, she's a part of me, wants to say, what are you complaining about? And then this anger has the potential to come up, which is completely unrelated to the situation, completely unrelated to them. But it's just this sense of you don't know how good you've got it. And so, in that respect, I don't want them to understand those feelings. I wouldn't want them to have to know how hard it was for me. But on the other hand, then sometimes a lot less so because I'm very aware. But, sometimes you'd be going, seriously, you're complaining about that? And I think particularly so when they hit the age of 12, when things got really challenging for me, I really had to sort of take a step back and go, wow, you are still so young at 12. And so you sort of, yeah, you see your own journey again in a way through their growing up as well. But I think, yeah, it's really important that I guess I don't know quite how to describe it, but there is a part of me that they will never understand. And I
Thank
never
goodness.
want them to.
Yeah, for sure. I can
Um,
understand that as a mother. And I think for you as well. I mean, presumably they know all about it and they know about the book. Have you talked, obviously you've talked to them about it.
yeah, so I remember very clearly sitting with the oldest two and telling them what had, because obviously, where's their grandfather? And for a long time, we said that he was very ill in his thoughts, and that's why he died. And that was enough at that point. But then I do remember sitting with them and explaining that he'd taken his own life. And that was really hard. And then talking about the confession. But also, I guess in some way, that was important because then they do understand me a bit better. My daughter has read the book and she's so lovely. She just said, "I'm so proud of you and you're an amazing role model for me." So
Oh.
yeah, what more could a mother want to hear? But on the other hand, I don't want to overburden them with this stuff. That's my stuff and my story. And of course, it has generational trauma is a thing. I think they will have been impacted by some of that on some level. But I think because we talk about it very openly, I think that really helps.
Yeah, the truth in that respect so important, isn't it?
Absolutely the truth.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And not to, I mean, obviously when they're little and they're not really old enough to understand what it means, but as they get older, and I do think it's important that we don't sugarcoat these things. Our children are very lucky that they've grown up in this lovely bubble, but real life does happen outside of that. And like you say, I do think the truth is important in those moments to be honest about how you're feeling. And then that in turn teaches them to be honest about how they feel, right?
Totally. And also, I guess just to say, nobody feels 100% all of the time. And you will struggle with your mental health as you go through your life. We don't talk about it. We obviously talk about our physical health a lot, but yeah, your mental health is also part of your health and you will struggle with it. And there are ways and places where you can go when you're struggling, and it's nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah, and it's okay to set boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously, I think the people pleasing element of, especially I think children that were brought up in the kind of Generation X, which I know we both fall into. We are X, aren't we? Yes, we're not millennials, we're X.
No, I'm definitely not a millennial.
No, I'm not a millennial. We're and the boomers and then Generation X, wasn't it? And I do think in the 80s and 90s we were just told, just do as you're told. And so there was this element of people pleasing. And I think as a generation, it's something that we struggle with. But there wasn't as much choice given because there was this put up and shut up attitude from our parents who were a lot of them, like my mum was born in 1939. She was a war child. So there was very much that element of, you don't know you're born, love. Like we
Yeah.
had rations till I was this old, and and she lived on the moors in a farm where they didn't even have electric lights.
Yeah.
So there was this constant, you don't know how lucky you are. You need
Yeah.
to just get on with it and do as you're told. And so this people pleasing is something I've definitely struggled with over the years.
Yeah.
And as much as you want to teach your children to be well behaved and there's an element of discipline, there is also that being able to set boundaries thing, which has been
On both sides, I guess, that as a parent you set boundaries, but the child can set boundaries as well. And I remember when I first heard about the concept of boundaries, it's like, wow, this is radical. I'm actually allowed to say, I don't want that, or that's not right for me.
just say no. No, thank you. Would you like to go out today? No, thanks. Oh, like that was a big learning to say no to things. That was huge for me. Yeah.
Absolutely, which you just don't think about. But, also within relationships, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
No. And I guess in that respect, I'm really heartened when I see my kids and their friends that they are much better at putting those boundaries in place. And that sometimes, yeah, leads to a bit of friction, but much rather that than the people pleasing.
Yeah. And it's much more truthful and honest in terms of them following their gut instinct, which takes us right back to the first thing you
Yeah,
said. But
totally. Yeah.
it's so interesting, isn't it? So obviously your book is about acceptance, really, isn't it? In the end,
Yeah.
it's that acceptance of you're never going to know the truth. What does that, so there's no unfinished business for you really in that respect. I mean, maybe a
No, I guess not. And also it was that thing I was saying before that I'm much more fluid, less rigid and brittle than I was, that yeah, things will come, things will go. It's a feeling, it's not forever. It's that thing of this too shall pass. And it makes life much easier for me, at least, that if something is hard, then I sort of go, okay, this is hard now, but that will change as well. When I feel less that I'm stuck, more that I'm just processing. And yeah, I don't feel at this point there's any unfinished business, really.
Yeah, that's
Um,
good. So obviously now through your yoga and do you somatic is it somatic as well or
I mean, it's not named somatic, but that is absolutely what I'm teaching. I think my yoga teaching has evolved in the last 8 years since I've been doing it, and it constantly changes. Yeah.
and you think that and obviously that's helped you make peace with it all really. I mean that's been fundamental, hasn't it, to
Abs- yeah,
this
absolutely.
journey.
I think all those emotions from a very young age were trapped in my body. And I think once I started to move in a much more open way, I think the joy of yoga is, I know we're sold Instagram yoga, but that's not what I teach. The joy of yoga is that it's finding the right way to move within your own body. And that's going to look really different for all of us.
Mm.
So there's a freedom in that.
And a release, I suppose.
Yeah. And a letting, yeah, absolutely. A letting go.
So, and obviously you still work, you said survivors of bereavement of suicide. And you still do that?
Yes. And that, funnily enough, I sort of approached them thinking that, oh, I want to give something back. I want to volunteer. And I do lead the group there, but actually, I get so much from that myself. There's just having an authentic conversation within a group is just wonderful, where no one's pretending, there's no one-upmanship. Everyone's just really trying to support each other. And they are if you are bereaved by suicide, they are an amazing resource. So they run virtual and in-person groups nationally. And they also have a helpline, and all the volunteers are bereaved by suicide themselves. So you really are speaking to someone who has a knowledge about this at a lived level.
Yeah. And we'll make sure, obviously, all that information's in the show notes as well for anyone that has been affected. But, I was just going to say, I guess in that respect, the fact that, like you said, it's a safe space because people can be completely honest about how they feel because there's an authenticity. I mean, I think that word is overused, but it nevertheless, in that respect, everybody there is being authentic and real about how they're feeling. So the importance of that safe space is integral, really, isn't it, to what
Yeah.
they
And
offer?
a bereavement by suicide is just so different
Well, because
to,
there's so much shame, isn't there?
yeah, and there's stigma and there's anger, and it's so complex that I think being in a space where you can explore that openly is amazing.
And again,
And
it's another
really
release,
important.
isn't it?
Yeah, totally,
Yeah,
totally. And it's you're able to be truthful about your experience. You don't have to sugarcoat it.
yeah. So in the moments now when those you do have those odd little moments of something just pops into your mind, how is yoga the go-to for self-care, or what do you do for yourself to protect yourself now?
I guess I write.
Yeah,
So I do quite a lot on LinkedIn, that I'll just work something out, or I will just sit really quietly. And sometimes I'll do absolutely the wrong thing and I'll grab the remote and watch some telly instead if I can't process at that moment. Or I like walking. But I definitely, we're talking about things that we didn't know as kids, even that concept of self-care.
yeah,
Were we ever taught to take care of ourselves?
no,
As in to be soft and gentle? No, it's
Not really. I don't think so. It just wasn't talked about, was it? And I'm a Reiki healer, and that again, the concept of healing or self-healing even would have been totally alien to me even 10 years ago, or
Yeah,
even, even 5 years ago, actually. I mean, although I was kind of on that journey by then. But nevertheless, it is to understand or even address the concept that we are capable of healing with energy or with, like you say, that being still rather than turning to something that will, it's an escape, uh, take our minds as an escape, like television or social media or doom scrolling or whatever.
yeah,
Because let's not forget, for our generation and for the millennial generation, there was no policing of social media at all. We were the guinea pigs, really, for that, because it was all, we remember mobile phones being invented. And getting Snake and being so addicted to Snake on Nokia phones, and then and the evolution of texting and chat
absolutely.
rooms and all of that on the internet, and the addictive nature of it wasn't talked about at that point
Yeah.
because everybody was just so amazed by this new technology. And obviously now that's being rescinded in lots of instances with young people, as it should be. But we
Yeah.
didn't know any better, did we?
No, absolutely. But I also think we need to address it in ourselves as well, because
Yeah.
we're role modeling that. It's all very well that if I'm sat there with my phone going, will you get off your phone? It doesn't work.
No,
But
no.
yeah, it's a huge one because I think it draws you away from yourself and from your truth and from your peace.
Agreed. And the thing was that before social media, the idea of should we go for a walk and just clear our heads was quite a normal one. Whereas
Yeah,
now it's a more of a definite decision is that I need to get out in nature or I need to make time to go out for a walk rather than that being the natural choice because there's nothing else to do.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up, we didn't have a television. So, my dad would read books to me,
Yeah.
which is such an unknown concept.
Well, we would write
Uh,
letters to
yeah,
friends.
yeah.
Because we didn't have emails or texts and it was only the house phone. I've got a big box full of letters of friends that I met through my dancing days where we would go to festivals and then we would write. They lived in Birmingham, we lived in Huddersfield, and we would write because that was what we had. Because my dad wouldn't let me use the phone because he was tight. And it was a long way. It was a national call. It wasn't local.
Yeah,
So times have changed. And
yeah,
you're right that we have to address that. And if in ourselves, recognizing the need to remember that, and I talk about a lot of that in my work with my mojo coaching, is that I don't believe that mojo is something we can find. Like when people talk about having their mojo, I don't think you can find it or search for it. It's about remembering. It's about
yeah,
remembering who you are, what it feels like to be aligned, what it feels like to be at peace, which is
yeah.
basically what you said. And I think it's we spend so much time searching, don't
Yeah.
we?
And in yogic terms, that would be just coming back to your source,
Yes,
coming back to
exactly.
that original part,
Yeah, that
which,
inner work.
yeah, which however much happens in your life, whatever you experience, that source is there and is waiting, I believe anyway,
I agree.
to be
Yeah.
rediscovered.
Yeah, but we're so busy, aren't we? We forget to reconnect. And I talk about it a lot when I teach dancing, because particularly in ballet and tap, actually, you can't think about anything else when you're doing that. You have to be totally in the moment. You have to focus. You can't let your mind wander, because if you do, you've stopped.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I talk about it, the three but B's is your brain, your body, and your breath. And I think you have to connect to all three in order to be able to function in that environment. With tap, remembering a whole tap
yeah,
sequence with your feet, you can't, your mind can't wander. And I
yeah,
do think that is why dance And any kind of movement, yoga with breathing as well, is so important because the meditative nature of it is overlooked. Yes, it's uplifting. Yes, we get a kick of endorphins and everything, but actually, what you get is that meditative
Yeah.
process of escape. So you come out of that dance studio an hour later going, oh, I feel so much better because
Yeah.
you've just, and that as children, for you and I know we didn't know when we met each other that we had this kind of shared journey.
Yeah.
But, we spent all our lives dancing. And no wonder we
Yeah.
felt great. No wonder we wanted to do it because it felt amazing, right? And my
It,
mum
it,
always said to me, go dancing. You always feel better when you've been dancing.
but it shuts down that overthinking, overanalyzing brain. And as you say, it brings you back to yourself and it grounds you into the earth.
Well, and it connects mind, body, and soul, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that's the whole, I think that's part what we forget. That's what we
Yeah.
forget to do is that connection between the three. So, yeah. So, just to kind of bring us to a close, really, obviously, we've already mentioned that if anyone has been triggered by or affected by anything that they've heard us talk about today, we will make sure that all that information is in the show notes for them and that there are people out there that can help.
Yeah.
But for anyone that's suffering, is there any advice that you would like to share?
Well, so I would also say that there's another brilliant resource which is called the Hub of Hope. And so you can go online and you find the Hub of Hope, and they are very specific about what you're struggling with, and they will give you resources in your local area. So
Amazing.
that's a good one. I think the big thing is for me, stop comparing yourself to other people and start with who you are. Because if I compare myself to other people, I might say, oh, I'm not as good as yoga as someone who's maybe 20 years younger. I'm not very ambitious. You can keep picking away at yourself. Oh, I've got a wrinkle, I've got this, I've got that. Just start celebrating your small successes and start looking at yourself and everything that you've come through, because we're all so different. How can we possibly compare ourselves? Our starting points are different. We're all so unique. So I guess it's just about being softer and kinder and more compassionate with yourself and finding the people. I guess for me, there's a lot about being in community, finding the people where you can be your, I don't want to say authentic now.
No,
You
I
said
know. Sorry.
but
But you're right to say
yeah,
your authentic self. Yeah.
where you can be your real self, where you don't have to pretend or mask, and yeah, you can celebrate yourself as you are.
Even with your battle scars.
Yeah, and I guess just we do take ourselves very seriously, I think, which I get. I'm an incredibly intense person, but yeah, there is, like you say, I'm thinking about a dance class now and thinking of just that joy of just
Moving
doing,
your body.
find your thing, whatever that is, if it's walking in nature, if it's painting, if it's writing, or allow yourself creativity is a really important way to express. And I think we're often, oh, it's frivolous, why are you doing that, it's not working towards your career. And so what? Find the things that spark you.
Yeah. I've actually been reading an incredible book, well, listening actually to an incredible book on Spotify called Signs by Dr. Tara Schwartz. And it's all about intuitive signs, but also about how to connect back to your intuition. And a lot of that is to do with creativity and finding the beauty in things that have no major purpose. It's a brilliant book. I can highly recommend it. And it's on Spot. If you have Spotify, you can listen to it for free.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and it's a brilliant book. She's written another one as well called The Source. And they're very interesting books. And she really goes into a lot of detail about how creativity is so important for the soul. So
Right.
I agree with you completely.
Ah, thank you. Also, I've just remembered the author of The Midnight Library. It's Matt
Oh,
Haig.
Ah, right.
Um,
So I've written that down.
yes.
That'll be on my reading list. Oh, well, Micah, thank you so much for your time.
No,
Um,
thank you for having me, and thank you for taking the time to read the book as well. I really do appreciate that. That means a lot.
no, and I think if anybody's, and I'm sure people will enjoy this conversation, they should definitely go and buy the book and read it. It's an amazing account of your experience through childhood and obviously then onwards towards acceptance of everything that you went through. And it is a story of hope, ultimately, which is what we all want, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
So even despite such challenging circumstances, you have created this lovely life and are living in peace, which is ultimately what we all strive for. So yeah, so thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.